I think one of the things all of us would love to hear is how's this been for you to write this book, the experience that you've had with other people, and then especially your experience of the online community reading it and all of that.
Sure. It's really interesting experience for me to go through this. As I was writing it, I was writing it kind of at different times of the day. So sometimes at the end of the day, sometimes at the very beginning of the day, and sometimes on my phone on the subway after I went to something. Because what I wanted to do was to capture as soon as possible exactly how I felt and what I went through, so that I wasn't going back at the end of the process and saying, oh, well, I remember feeling so benevolent toward those people during that time, and I remember feeling so energized when really, I felt crabby or tired or whatever. I wanted to be able to capture exactly what I was feeling so that when I was writing about it, it did have a natural arc to it, both in terms of narrative, but also just in terms of how I actually felt. I wanted to make sure that the book was honest, and I think, when someone has described my efforts as bumbling, so there's, perhaps it's, honest to a fault at times, but I think it's the idea was to try to kind of just let people know I don't know what I'm doing, and that's okay. I'm going out there. I'm going to try to do the best I can with what I have and where I am, and that's all we're all called to do. And that I think a lot of times the idea that we're going to try to do these things and that we might do them imperfectly keeps a lot of us from starting. And so I wanted to let people know that it was okay to kind of go out there and make a best effort at being merciful, but also to kind of make mistakes and learn along the way, and that was part of the process, and that was part of receiving God's mercy in the process.
And how has it been to hear other people's reaction to your work?
It has been very, very humbling. It's been really, really wonderful to read the reactions on the website. It's been really wonderful to read emails that I've received, or even reviews on Amazon, because I think it just reminds me of what sort of a small role I actually play in it. So it's this idea of, I wrote this book, but people are not making changes in their lives because of the book per se, or because of me. It's because of God's grace and the way that God works through each of us. And it's amazing to me that by the fact that I can share this story, that other people will have their own stories that come from this, and that they can share with others, and that this thread of grace runs through it all, and that this God's mercy is so present in all of our lives. And so, honestly, I just I think I went back to the site a couple times, and the second time I went back, I was just crying. I was reading your reflections, and I started bawling, and I was so moved by your honesty and your willingness to share, and your stories, and how obvious it was that God was working in your lives. So thank you, and thank you for having me here as well. I should have started with that. I'm really very grateful, even if I do identify slightly more with the lunch crowd. So I'm not a morning person per se.
Well, it's 7:30 here, and we asked these people to really make sure they were here at 7:30, and every one of them was here at 7:30.
I am extremely impressed, and I am also grateful for the time difference between Creighton and me.
All right, who would like to share with Kerry something of your experience with the book, with this Lent journey, what she might have done for you, what you found challenging, helpful, hopeful? We did a lot of sharing over the last month, but Everybody's shy like you. David.
Kerry, I'm David. As you know, I work as the liturgist here in campus ministry. So you might expect, my head's a bit spinning, and I don't know. Sometimes this week I don't know exactly where I am. But one of the things that really attracted me was the way you framed the book. At the very beginning, at the very end, you talked about your little Mardi Gras party in the apartment, and then being at the Easter Vigil. And I'm just wondering, could you tell us a little more about how walking through RCIA as a sponsor helped? What was the interplay between that and your experiments in these Corporal Works of Mercy?
Sure. Yeah. No. Thanks, Dave. That's a good question. I think being a part of the RCIA program and being a sponsor has been such a joy to me. It's been such a way for me to see my faith with new eyes and through the eyes of people who are choosing to join a faith that is not always popular and it's not always easy today. And the people that are joining are really nice, smart, intelligent, inventive, creative people who make me want to be a part of the church more. And they have really sort of encouraged me along the way in ways that maybe they don't even realize right away and that I don't even realize right away. And they've also reminded me of things about the church that I sometimes take for granted or sometimes get annoyed with or something that I think is like, oh, here we go again, this same ritual. And they're like, isn't it great that we have these rituals? Yeah, right?
Yeah.
Yes, it is. It is. It's not just going through the motions. It's being able to really, really appreciate it. And this year, the woman that I sponsored last year is a sponsor for someone this year.
Oh.
And to see how she has taken on her faith in a way that just she really, really wants to live it out, and she's really sort of taken a real ownership of it. It's not just, great, all right, I'm, Catholic now, and I'm going to continue to go on about my merry way. She's really sort of, I can see a change in her, and I can see how she has just really kind of come into her own in her faith, and how she's encouraged me and challenged me as we've gone forward as well. And it's been really, really, really nice. And a lot of the folks in the RCIA program, either from the year that I wrote about it or from the following year, have been so encouraging about this writing process and about the book and about wanting to do more and to help and to really be a part of it. There's just a real enthusiasm there that is easy to take for granted or to forget about in your own faith life. When, as a cradle Catholic, there are certain things that I really love about the church, and that I get excited about. And there are other things that I forget. No, you should be really excited about this. Last year, one of the women who entered the church was getting her first communion, but somehow she had to move to San Francisco. We had to have this sort of like emergency baptism kind of for her before she left because she was leaving before the Easter Vigil. So she came to a regular mass and we had the baptism, and she received her first communion, and we were on the front rows sort of waiting to, or as support for her. And so I'm kneeling, and she goes up and she gets communion, and she kind of looks at me, and I look up at her and kind of smile, and she goes, "Ee!" And she runs, like hugs me, and like runs straight out of the communion line squealing, which is not a typical reaction, right? It's but maybe it should be. I mean, not exactly, but like how often do we actually feel that way when we go up to receive the Eucharist and say, "Oh, yes, do you know what happened here? This is amazing." Instead of like, okay, I hope this line goes quickly because I might have to leave right after communion, or trying to really appreciate what's there, and that's the kind of thing that RCIA has really taught me, and to remember to keep going back to to the core elements of the faith that I'm reminded of over and over again as I sort of hear them again. It's in some ways sort of as my third year going through the program as a sponsor, there's a kind of element of like Lectio Divina or something where you hear you hear things over and over again, and you pick out what phrases are really meaningful to you, what aspects of this strike you at different points in your life that maybe didn't strike you in the same way or strike you differently now than they did before. So that's been really, really great for me. So thanks.
Sure, thank you.
That is a great story about communion, because, boy, we don't squeal. Here's
Kerry, my name is Angela Maynard. I'm a nurse down in the Student Health Center here. And I wasn't educated by Jesuits or Dominicans, but by Mercy nuns and raised by a Mercy mom. So I'm curious how, I mean, that's the Works of Mercy is something that has kind of been ingrained in me, I guess, from the cradle maybe. How did you become familiar with these, and what prompted you to really kind of dig into the Corporal Works of Mercy? And I loved the book, and I loved the we talked a lot about the water at the race and how you the water was there, but it wasn't handed to people.
Right.
It was great. Loved it.
Thrust the water at the runners.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, thank you. No, I think the Works of Mercy were something, as I've kind of written a little bit about that I memorized them in grade school. Here's a list and write them down. And I think sometimes they're so simple. The actions seem so obvious that it's like, of course I fed the hungry. That's what we're all called to do. And then you realize, when did I do this? And I realized, I don't know, and the last time I did this was really in like a very deliberate way in which I recognized it as such and recognized it as a work of mercy. And so I think part of what I wanted to do was both to actively try to kind of jumpstart my spirituality by deliberately going about and doing these actions for others, and also by recognizing and lifting up the ways in which they might already be present in my life. Because I think, a woman who is a young mother is going to have a hard time taking an infant to a soup kitchen to feed the hungry, but she might be feeding that infant, which is the young children have very corporal needs, and so that's also work of mercy. And to lift that up and to see that, I think allows us to be in this kind of mercy mindset where we are both open to new opportunities for mercy and able to recognize mercy in our lives as it sort of appears, and to take and to react to that, to be prepared. So I think I wanted to be better prepared in some ways, to seek these opportunities out and to react to them, because I know I think a lot of times, at least in New York, there's a lot of people who are in need on the street, asking for money or asking for food or asking for help, and it's easy to ignore those and to feel okay about ignoring them by saying, I didn't have a dollar ready. I didn't know. I wasn't ready. I was on my way to something, rather than to say, all right, well, I'm just going to put $1 in my pocket before I go out in the morning. If I see someone, I'll just pull out, give it to them, and I'm not going to ask questions, and it's, I'm not going to try to judge, is this person needy enough, to have to have this dollar? Is this that sort of, I guess, like the who am I to judge, the Pope Francis line, and sort of go about loving and reacting rather than trying to assess and kind of analyze the situation, just being ready and being prepared. I think I wanted to make sure that when I did these things, it was not a checklist. It was not, okay, here's the 7 lists of things, 7 Corporal Works of Mercy that I'm going to do, but rather, or like, how do I meet the minimum standard for being merciful, and then so I don't have to feel guilty? It's more like, how do I ingrain these things in me so that I can develop a better relationship with God and with the people around me, and and just have a better sense of God's will in my life, in my connection to others. I think a couple things that I learned from the process were that, one, I needed to be specific in some ways as I was going about these things, especially, as you approach Lent. A lot of times I would say I want to do more of something or less of something, and that's if I'm not going to the gym at all, if I go to the gym more once during lunch, that's more technically, but is that really in the spirit of what I'm trying to do and what Lent is about? Not really. And the idea of sustainability. So I don't think the experiment that I did is necessarily sustainable in the long term of I'm going to do one Corporal Work of Mercy every week for the rest of my life and keep going in a cycle and that's it. But doing nothing is not really sustainable either. Doing nothing separates us from God and from other people, and not being in that service mentality is also draining. You can be overtired by doing too many things, but you can also kind of just be spiritually drained by not having those connections to God and not having those connections to our community. So finding something in between is I think is what I'm trying to work at. And I mean, one of the things I have not figured this all out yet, obviously, and so I think the process has just been really helpful to me, and hearing what others have done, how others have experienced the works of mercy and how they've experienced Lent has been really helpful to me as well, just as I keep thinking about how to continue on in this process. And the Sisters of Mercy have been really supportive, and I think as you've read, I've joined the Mercy Associates, which has been a really lovely community to kind of discuss these issues with and to hold each other accountable and to hear from different people about how they try to live these out at different stages in their lives and what they've learned along the way, because we're all sort of at different points with different family situations, and it's been really nice to kind of hear from someone who I'm like, oh, they must be way too busy to do all these things, and then they're doing, quite a few works of mercy in their, quote unquote spare time, and I'm like, all right, maybe I need to challenge myself a bit more, or to really just learn from others' experience, and that has been, a really valuable sense of community. And I think for me, one of the really valuable things about community is that people see in you things that you don't necessarily see in yourself. So your community, the part of being in a community, people are able to recognize in you ways in which you might be being called by the Spirit, or be just sort of some of your talents that maybe you're unwilling to recognize, or and I think sort of one example of that for me is that Father George Williams, who's the prison chaplain at San Quentin, and whom I visited in the book, came to America House a couple months ago because he was in New York, and I said hello to him again, and we were catching up. And I was telling him about a reporting trip that I took to Rwanda, and and about the forgiveness and reconciliation that had occurred for many people there. And he said, oh, we have a restorative justice program at San Quentin. You should come and talk to the guys at San Quentin about restorative justice and reconciliation in Rwanda. And this is something that I would not have made a connection between, and that I felt wholly unqualified to talk about, really. I mean, having gone to Rwanda for a week. But he was able to point out to me the value of just someone who went there and is able to, and heard the stories of people there, and bring those stories back to the guys at San Quentin. So it's real, I'm just a conduit for those stories. It's not that I have a certain expertise, or I have to be, the authoritative person on this matter. It's, I heard stories that are valuable. Who else might like to hear those stories, and who can I tell those to? And so I went to San Quentin last month, and it was really a beautiful, beautiful experience for about 80 guys who came. And I was thinking, I don't know why people are showing up to this. Is it because they think it'll be good on their parole? Is it because they like to have this conversation with each other and I'm kind of intruding? And it was one of the most beautiful, powerful conversations. And I just told the stories that I had heard in Rwanda of forgiveness and reconciliation. And they asked so many questions and they were really involved and really engaged. And they were making connections between the Hutu and the Tutsi and the Bloods and the Crips and like these kind of, things I never in my life would have thought of, but which made sense and which were really meaningful to them and really valuable. And it really, like, it was just very humbling again because it had so little, I had such a small role in that. Just, it was mostly other people recognizing things and recognizing connections and me just telling a couple of stories. But it ended up being a really powerful experience to talk to those guys and hear their stories and to have more stories to share with others. So it's been a really good process. So that's sort of a long answer to that question.
Thank you.
I don't know.
Yeah, go ahead.
Where is Steve?
Yeah,
Right there.
Yeah, right
Okay.
there. You're on.
I don't know where to look. Hi, Kerry. I am Linda. I work with the Institute for Priestly Formation on the Creighton campus. We work with seminarians from all around the world developing their spirituality. My comment is I have a daughter and son-in-law who are really into social justice, and they lived in Minneapolis a year ago. They're now in Santiago, Chile, teaching, and this is how far their social justice is taking them. But when they were living in Minneapolis, every Wednesday night they would go to a homeless shelter for men and check the men in and just talk to them and just, be a friendly face. Beautiful. It was just incredible. We were very supportive of this. However, they got a lot of pushback from their friends. Why would you want to do that? Why would you want to associate with those people? Why would you even go into that part of town? I'm just wondering if you, in your relationships with your friends, your contemporaries, how have your stories impacted them? Has it brought them to a more active role in seeking social justice, or are they, how have they reacted to it? Did they stand back? Do they give you a hard time? Whatever. Thank you.
Sure. No, thank you. Thanks. It's a good question. I think, well, actually, it makes me think of when I was going to stay at the overnight homeless shelter. One of my friends was like, "Aren't they kind of housing you? Like, this is sort of their house, and like, what is the point of you staying at the homeless shelter? Like, that's sort of more their home than yours, right? Like, shouldn't you just bring them to your apartment? Kind of like half making fun of me, but half like, really kind of saying, what is the point of what you're doing?" And I think a lot of it was those conversations and that relationship and just being present and acknowledging people as people. I mean, and one of the guys said jokingly, but kind of not jokingly there, we wanted to think we're high quality homeless people, and it was a he said it sort of jokingly, but there is a desire to be seen and to be recognized and to be acknowledged as people. And so that's sort of how I tried to explain it to my friends. But I think most of my friends were supportive in a kind of abstract, disconnected way, in a sense of like, we know Kerry does sort of weird, quirky things. We're gonna let her do her thing, and we're gonna say, how's that thing going? And now anytime someone says like Works of Mercy, they're like, oh yeah, that's you, right? And even if I'm not exactly sure anyone really knew what was happening, because it was sort of a strange thing to explain to people, just in a conversation where people say, oh, what are you doing for Lent? And you're like, well, like, how long have you got? And you don't want to like be that person who's just like, well, so my Lent is this, and oh, coffee, oh, well, that's nice. And because that's what I gave up this year, coffee, which is why it's that much more of a challenge for me to put sentences together right now. But I think I think one of the things is not making those comparisons, is doing what is valuable in your life at this moment. And so I think once the book came out, so, a number of my friends read it, and after they read it, they said, "Oh, that's what you're doing. I see. I've experienced that. I've experienced this. I saw a homeless person on the street the other day, and I read your book, and then I gave him $1," or, you know, like people wanting to tell me how they have interacted with people or what challenges they've faced. And I've had a lot of really productive conversations once the book has come out, once people have read it, because I think it's something that's hard to talk about sometimes with your friends in a way that is meaningful, because you don't always know how people are going to respond to. You don't want to necessarily put yourself up for criticism, because that can be hard. And also you don't want to come across as looking like you're trying to be a saint, or, you know, well, I mean, I guess we're all trying to be saints, but looking, you know, like kind of like, oh, I went this morning at the bread line, you know, like, and you know, it's a hard balance to sort of discuss and then just start to annoy people with these stories. So how do you strike that balance? And I think the book gave me the chance for people to kind of read it and take in what was meaningful to them, and then use that as jumping off points. I mean, even little things like I wrote about when I was in grade school and high school, my mom would have us say 10 Hail Marys in the car on the way to school, and a friend of mine sent me a text the other day and was like, I was driving my kids to school, they're 5 and 3, and they were all fighting in the back, and I just said, who wants to say Hail Marys? They both went, me! For no reason. And they were so excited. She's like, you know, it just was such a great moment, and they were so excited, and I was so glad to have thought of that, and have thought of you, and, you know, I told my mom, and she's like, oh yeah, that kept you kids from fighting too. It was really good. And I think just so, like, little things, like where I'm not necessarily going to talk about having said Hail Marys in the car on the way to school on a normal basis, but when it kind of is out there and it's open and it comes up, I think people are really willing and able to respond. So it's sort of been a nice way to kind of just put stories out there and let people react to them, you know, as they will.
I'd like to know, how is she doing on her coffee?
How are you, Kerry? Somebody wants to know, how are you doing on your coffee?
Getting on coffee.
I'm counting the days now. I'm counting the days until Easter. I'm having an Easter brunch for some friends who will be in the city, and I'm planning to go buy a large box of coffee from Dunkin' Donuts prior to the brunch. So, and this is one of those things where, so I decided to give up coffee, and then it's one of my, like, Lenten kind of, like, things that messes with my head, because I was like, if I give up coffee, I'm just going to drink tea all the time, and I really like tea, and that's not really a sacrifice, just having tea every day. So maybe I have to give up tea as well. So then I gave up tea, and I was like, well, if I give up coffee and tea, I'm just gonna drink hot chocolate, and that's like, so I'm like, all right. So it's basically been like warm, comforting drinks, which I thought as it got into spring would be easier, but now that it's 30 degrees, I'm really.
Yeah.
Now I'm drinking chocolate milk, and I feel like I'm 5. I don't know. There's got to be, yeah, a better way. I like to think that you know, I'm growing in my Lenten processes fast and doing something. I always try to do something and give something up. So trying to find that right balance. I'm still working at it.
That's great. Can I ask, you talked about the experience of being with the homeless, and one of them said, we want to be high quality homeless. And you said, oh, that's right. I forgot they were homeless. And then when you were in the prison and you were talking about the difference between the East Coast and the Midwest, and you said, I completely forgot. I came to see prisoners and I ended up talking to people. Has this experience changed your you referred to it a little bit, but the way you see people, has it made it easier? What can you tell all of us who have the same struggle?
Yeah, I think I don't know if the word is easier. It's made me more deliberate about making sure that I recognize people's humanity, and it's the process has helped me to try to hold myself accountable, and to say, it's not just, those 40 days. It's not just an experiment. It's a constant challenge. It's something that's every day. And the hard thing about that is that it requires us to change. It requires us to change our lives, and in ways that are sometimes uncomfortable, and sometimes require us to react in ways we don't really feel ready for sometimes. But the idea is to try to make ourselves ready for that. And I think and sometimes our efforts are we have good intentions and they're sort of misguided. One of the things that I did that didn't go into the book was a program that connected sandwiches with commuters. So the idea is you go to a central location and you pick up some sandwiches, and then on your way home on the subway, just the nature of New York is you'll likely run into people who are in need, who need some food, who need some help, and you can hand them like a bagged lunch, and that might be helpful. So I go to the central location, and I am given 4 bags of sandwiches and 4 partners in this group. So the 5 of us and our 20 sandwiches head out, and we're sent down to Penn Station. And if you've ever been to Penn Station in New York, you know that there are generally many, many people in need there. That it is a place that is just like people sometimes are sleeping in the bottom hallways, and it's often very easy to find people. So to be honest, we felt like a little bit relieved, because we were like, oh good, we can feel good about ourselves, but we'll also get rid of the sandwiches in like 5 minutes, and we can all go home. And we go there, and it's a warm evening or something. I forget exactly why, but there are almost no people in there that are obviously in need of these sandwiches. And so we're just kind of wandering awkwardly together, and these guys are like, oh, I gotta catch the Long Island Railroad at a certain time, so we better hurry up. And we go outside, and we're wandering around, and we were able to give a couple sandwiches away, and then a guy kind of yells at me like, hey. I was like, hello, yes? And he's like, I want a sandwich. Like, and he's sort of like a guy sitting on a bench who doesn't really look like he needs a sandwich, but then who looks like they need a sandwich? And then it's that Pope Francis, who am I to judge? Like, is there a minimum level of being hungry that you're supposed to be before you can get a sandwich? And so it's all these challenges that we're going through, and we finally managed to give almost all the sandwiches away, and we have like 2 left. We go around to the back of Penn Station. There's like 20 guys out there that look clearly in need of a sandwich, and we only have 2 left, and we kind of give them to them, and we apologize. And it felt very discouraging, because it did not feel like we were building relationships. It did not feel like we were really kind of seeing people as people. It felt like we were trying to get rid of sandwiches and get home. And it was just a very discouraging evening. Although I did go into work the next day, and Father Jim Martin, who I'm sure are familiar with, is one of my coworkers, and he came into my office and was asking me, oh, how'd your evening go? And I said, not great. It was not really. And I described him the events around Penn Station, and he said to me, you should write about this. And I said, I'm not, why? And he said, well, because you can call the chapter, Lead Us Not into Penn Station. And I said, well, maybe, but as much as I appreciate that pun, I don't know what, I'm sort of learning from this, but the process, I think, was the questions that come from that are these questions of, how do we sort of work as a community to serve the common good? How do we put others' needs in front of our own, when it's easier to just go home? You know, how do we sort of acknowledge individual needs while still meet the needs of a group? And there's so many sort of questions that have come up in that have continued to kind of challenge me and to try to make me so recognize the difference between handing out a sandwich, you know, sort of in that rush to get somewhere else, and when we were handing out sandwiches in the bread line, where it felt very present, where we felt very much like we are here until the sandwiches run out, and not and as long as there are people here, not just we're here until we can get rid of these and then we're going to run away. It was much more deliberate. So just even like where you place yourself and the attitude you have can change a certain action and can change that interaction with people. So being able to kind of acknowledge that that relationship and that chance for real interaction has been really helpful to me throughout this process.
Kerry, this is Andy. In this room, we have people we have several faculty members, we have people in student life, residence life, purchasing, campus ministry, do clinical work with students, nursing. We're part of a Jesuit university, and in many ways we wrestle with, even though your subtitle is wonderful, how to do these things and keep your day job, most of us try to see our mission in our day job, and and in some way to be more conscious that the provincials and the generals have told us that what we do needs to benefit those people on the margins of society. It's a long way to get into my question. What you do in America Magazine is very inspiring. How do you see your mission in that Jesuit-sponsored ministry benefiting those people on the margins in the indirect way being an editor is compared to the indirect way all of us do it? Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, it makes a lot of sense. I mean, I think, yeah, I have friends who are social workers or, you know, work in a homeless shelter and work very directly with these Corporal Works of Mercy, and I'm so inspired by that. It's sometimes hard to see my office as a place where mercy can also happen, but sometimes it is more obvious in that we get to sometimes give voice to people that don't have a voice elsewhere, that we can tell someone's story and connect that story with someone who hasn't heard that story and who might be able to take that action to change a life or to reconnect. I mean, I did this is a rare example, but I did a story, just sort of a reflection on a trip to Lebanon a couple of years ago where I had met with some Iraqi refugees, and they told their story, and they were kind of in this flux, in this transition, and I got a call from a gentleman who said, I read your story, and I want to get that family out of there. I want to help them move to a better place. Do you think $20,000 is enough? You know, what can I do? What else can I do? And I just sort of was floored, and I said, I'll connect you to the group that we visited, and that can sort of directly help that family. And he moved them to a better place. He paid to get them visas, and he paid and it's not that it's all about money or like direct results like that, but the fact that can happen, and that through stories, essentially, through sharing of stories. I think it's working here reminds me of the power of stories, of people's individual stories, of listening to the stories of men from the homeless shelter, and of my telling part of my life to them and finding those commonalities, and the same at the prison and the same everywhere, and seeing those shared elements of our stories. And I think at America we get to share so many stories that hopefully people can connect to, and that hopefully people feel a part of, and they maybe see themselves in a story, and maybe they know that they're not alone in a certain struggle, or they feel encouraged in their spirituality, or they feel like a member of the church because they are reading some of these articles, or they have a better understanding of their faith that they might be able to share with them. And for me, it's been really nice to connect with certain people, writers or readers through the magazine in a very real way. That we had an article by a young man with Down syndrome last year who kicked off our Generation Faith column, which was a column that we have for personal stories of faith from high school and college students. And he lives in Seattle, and he wrote about how he sees himself and what his challenges are and how others perceive him as a person with Down syndrome. And then there was a short essay that accompanied that by his brother at Notre Dame, who wrote about how his life had been changed by his brother's life, and what appreciation he had from the values and the example that his brother with Down syndrome had shown. And we got a lot of really nice letters about that. And also the boy's mother was so was so grateful and so proud of her sons, as she should be, that she kind of struck up a correspondence with me. And when I went out to Seattle for a talk recently, and I was able to meet with her, and we had and I met Joey, and we just, the kind of real connections that can come from this, and the kind of real exam. And she took me to the hospice center and the Center for Retired Sisters, where she and Joey volunteer, and I met with them, and so they were able to show me the examples of mercy that they were showing to others. And it just sort of widens those circles of mercy. And the Mercy Volunteer Corps, they have this song called Circle of Mercy, and it's a lovely song, but it is also very high pitched, and so it is very difficult to sing. And it is but it talks about these circles of mercy sort of expanding and being timeless, and it's just such a fitting image, I find, as I go through this whole process, is that America, working here, has allowed those circles of mercy to really grow. It's allowed me to connect with people. It's allowed me to feel more a part of a community, and it's allowed us to hopefully help to bring people in, to help people feel welcome as part of our Christian community, and to not feel alone. Because I think it's easy, despite all the ways that we can connect through technology and whatnot, to feel alone, to feel isolated. And that's part of what the Works of Mercy do. It helps us to feel less alone. It helps us to feel like we can be accepted somewhere, even though we're imperfect, even though we all bring our own challenges, but that together we can kind of help carry those challenges and move forward together.
Anyone? I got another one then. We read Pope Francis's Joy of the Gospel together, many of us. And I help out in a parish, a suburban parish on weekends. And it's a real challenge for me to see that most of us can accept that the world's broken and charity is a wonderful way to show mercy. But when the Pope starts talking about structural change, or a different distribution of wealth, or even saying trickle-down economics never worked and can't work, there are the range of people who just call him a communist or just say the church should get out of politics. I'm sure you experience it at America. There are people who get upset at you for what appears to be your liberal bias. But in talking about what your mission is there, as you sit around, I assume there's a table you sit around in deciding editorial choices. Do you wrestle with those questions? What's our mission in terms of the kind of, I mean, it's easier with Pope Francis saying these things, but it isn't always heard. And how do you, what's that mission and how do you stay hopeful?
Sure. I mean, I think we really do view ourselves as a kind of media ministry. It's more than just we put out a magazine and we want to get subscribers and we hope people read it. It's truly to try to lead a conversation, and that conversation. And Pope Francis has given us a lot of conversation starters. He's been such an interesting person in so many ways, and such a wonderful reminder, I think, of humility and the need to keep conversing about a lot of the things that he's bringing up. And I think in America we see ourselves trying to connect the church and the world and the church, and to sort of filter one through the other. I think a lot of people think of Catholic journalism as, oh, you write about bishops all the time, every day, and I think they forget that the church is so wide and that our faith is so huge, and that there's nothing on which our faith does not touch or that we can't reflect on through the lens of our faith. And so it's a wonderful challenge to us, and it's so open. I think people think, oh, it's, the church is, there's just it's all these rules, and there's no freedom in that. And I think the church offers such a wonderful way to go about almost any discussion, and that we try to think of what is the most productive way to talk about this, and what is the way that we can add something new to the conversation. And sometimes is that a perspective of someone who hasn't been heard yet? Is it an angle on a topic that hasn't really been covered? And how do we go about doing that in a way that is faithful, but sometimes challenging, and sometimes challenging to us, and sometimes challenging to readers? And we're always sort of trying to find that right balance, to try to to be challenging, and to be a witness, and to be faithful. And it's a challenge that we all kind of face in our daily lives in a way. So we as a magazine really face similar challenges to the ones that people just face in their daily lives. And so hopefully, if we can reflect that, we can help people to feel like they're not alone in those challenges, and to deal with them in their own daily lives in a way that is productive. And I think Pope Francis has spoken a lot about inequality, about poverty, about the works of mercy. My sister has been sending me links to articles about him talking about the works of mercy or doing the works of mercy. It's like, he's your best PR guy. This is great. And it's, I think he, in the interview that we published with him last fall, he said the phrase that I used at the very beginning of the book is that the ministers of the church must be ministers of mercy above all. And the thing that I found so interesting about that is that word "must." This is not a request from which we get to opt out. This is what we have to do, and how we do it can be different for each person. And there's so many ways to say yes to the gospel, and so that's wonderful. But I think we tend to think of mercy as I have mercy, I give mercy, I bestow mercy upon you, when really it's kind of this openness, this accompanying. It's that mercying that Pope Francis spoke about, is turning the noun into a verb. He's Pope and gets to make up words. And I think, and I I think that is part of what we try to do at America, is to be a magazine that is mercying, that is accompanying people, that is active, and that is engaged. And hopefully, by being that, we can help encourage our readers to be that in their daily lives as well.
Wow, thank you. Please, come on.
Hello, Kerry. My name is Teresa, and I am from Student Health. I just have a question. You've accomplished a lot and was very inspirational. Where is your journey leading you next?
Yeah, very good question. And it's something that I think about a lot. And I think, well, one of the things is I definitely have been exploring getting more involved in prison ministry. My time at San Quentin and my discussions with Father George Williams and my return to San Quentin have been really powerful experiences for me. And so I've been in touch with a couple places around here to try to get more involved in that kind of ministry. I'm also familiar with the challenges of trying to get people to write back to you or to answer your phone calls. Or so there's again, it's that sometimes that bureaucracy that surrounds these things that makes us that can make us a little discouraged. But that is what I hope to do more of out of this, because one of the things that I hoped would come from that experiment was that something from there would stick out in my life, and that would be something that I could pursue. And I think that's where I'm going to try to go, and I've been trying to do that as well, and also sending some books and some magazines to San Quentin. Like I'm trying to develop more of a relationship there, even though I can't go to that prison all the time because it's quite a ways away. But trying to figure out how to be more involved in that, or to be more involved in prison reform and working against solitary confinement and what are some of the challenges? Why do people end up in prison again? All of those elements. I've been thinking a lot more about that, and so I'm hoping to continue to pursue that, and also just trying to really recognize acts of mercy in my daily life, even when and to appreciate them when they are shown to me, to really be in that mercy mindset, as I said, and because I think that we can forget to recognize. We can also become so concerned that we're trying to show mercy to other people or to be mercy with other people that we forget to accept mercy. We forget to accept mercy from God for the times that we failed to do that. We forget to accept works of mercy from others on our behalf. And I think to be able to accept those things is a really important part of the process, because it is easier, I think, in some ways to perform works of mercy when we know what it feels like to have them performed for us. When we can literally say, I've been there, or I'm putting myself in your shoes, right? I understand what it's like to be humble enough to accept help, or to just be able to acknowledge that I need someone to accompany me right now. So trying to just be really mindful of that, and to work toward really being and to continue to be more deliberate. Like I said, it's not that one act a week kind of thing, but to see those works of mercy as works of mercy, and to try to respond, to really genuinely respond. And so that's what I've been trying to do throughout the process. And once you write a book about mercy, people expect you to be merciful. So it holds you accountable for sure.
Carrie, it's Maureen. Thank you so much for being here with us this morning. Without your coffee, we are grateful. And can we just tell Carrie thank you?